Welcome everyone. This is a roundup of newspapers that we did review during the week. We're bringing you back to those main papers that we saw during the week. That's international headlines. We begin this roundup today with the Wall Street Journal, the Europe edition, the one it did published on Monday. According to the paper, Europe's plan to aid Cyprus was raising so many risks. The paper added that a decision by the Eurozone finance ministers to raise 5.8 billion euro from taxes and depositors, including individuals with small amounts in their accounts, risks a political backlash for the newly elected center-right government in Cyprus. The paper also told us that stocks in the U.S. have soared. The U.S. stock market raised to all-time highs, impressed and surprised many on Wall Street, reported the paper. According to the publication, Syria's main opposition group was set to start talks on Monday to form a cabinet and appoint a prime minister to oversee the regions under rebel control. On Monday, The Guardian was also understands the UK paper wrote that Britain's main political leaders were taking talks on the future of press regulation down to the wire amid signs that David Cameron was prepared to reach a last-minute deal to avoid a damaging defeat in the House of Commons on March 18. And newspapers groups threatened a boycott of regulator if the Labour plan is agreed. The paper also wrote that George Osborne will attempt to shore up the government's credibility on economic revival on Monday when he accepts a recommendation from Lord Heseltine to target billions of pounds before the next election aimed at boosting regional growth. Still on Monday, the Wall Street Journal Asia said Cyprus leaders on Sunday raced to prevent a meltdown in the island's financial sector when banks reopened for business after a 3-day bank holiday on Tuesday. The paper told us that in a day of frantic high-level talks among government and political leaders, central bank officials, legislators and bank executives, President Nikos Anastasiadis tried to forge a compromise over a bank deposit levy Cyprus must impose in exchange for a 10 billion euro bailout from its Eurozone partners and the International Monetary Fund. A new Chinese Premier Li Keqiang pledged to slash bureaucracy and continue market-oriented reforms while boosting social spending and fighting pollution. The paper said Li, however, gave few specifics about how he plans to carry out those goals. And India has taken a giant move to cut the deadly tuberculosis in the country, wrote the paper. According to the paper, an international health initiative has brokered a landmark accord that aims to halve the price patients pay for advanced tests for TB that is resistant to standard drugs. On Tuesday, The Age from Australia wrote that, it carried this broad headline, Ministers desert PM. Expatiating on that, the paper said senior ministers in the Gillard government were reconsidering their support for the Prime Minister, a sign of collapsing confidence at a critical time. In more politics news, the paper still talked about Labour leadership, bringing to us what former Minister of Foreign Affairs Bob Carr said on ABC Radio on Monday. Page 18 has it all on Iraq 10 years after the US-led invasion. It was the focus story in this edition. We look at Hindustan Times, the one it published on Tuesday. According to the paper from India, Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan, who described the gang rape of a Swiss woman in Datia as shameful, has vowed that such an incident will not be allowed to take place in MP again. The paper said earlier the State Assembly had to adjourn for the day following strong protest by the Congress over Friday's incidents. In the same vein, the paper revealed that a fresh rape case surfaced at Pithampur industrial area, nearly 40 kilometers from Indore. The paper went on to say that a tribal woman was gang raped in a moving car and then abandoned. The Indian government has fixed the consent age at 18. The paper reported that barely 3 days after the center decided to fix the age of consent for sex at 16, yes, main opposition parties and even the UPA's outside supporters on Monday forced the government to raise it to 18 years. Still on Tuesday, we look at the Daily Telegraph, the edition we had on Tuesday. The UK paper said more than 2.5 million families will each be able to claim up to £1,200 to help subsidize the cost of childcare under a £1 billion scheme to be unveiled on Tuesday by PM David Cameron and Nick Clegg. The paper also said a court heard on Monday that two men plotted to rob and murder Joss Stone, the 25-year-old pop star, because of her connections to the royal family. See that story on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, the Tuesday edition. Another story said PM David Cameron has been accused of creating a threat to press freedom by an international body which polices human rights in some of the most autocratic countries. And a landmark program of unannounced inspections in hospitals and care homes has found that more than a third are still failing to respect elderly people's basic dignity despite a series of scandals. We look at the Wall Street Journal, the edition it carried on Wednesday. The paper talked as well about Cyprus's financial worries. It wrote that Cyprus's parliament on Tuesday voted down a controversial bank deposit levy, rejecting the €10 billion bailout deal the country had negotiated 4 days earlier with European and international creditors to stave off a financial sector meltdown. The paper stated that the European banks that own Visa Europe may soon decide to sell the card payments organization to the US-based Visa Incorporation and set up a rival system in Europe. According to the publication, the strength of the UK car market, which in February continued to defy the prolonged Europe-wide slump in demand for new cars, looks increasingly unsustainable. Find out why. We take on National Post, the Wednesday edition, read a story which said, full life lies ahead for an 8-year-old girl whose brain was surgically sliced into two to stop constant seizures. Read about the story of her remarkable recovery after the surgery. The paper reported that Finance Minister Jim Flaherty has succeeded in pressuring Manulife Bank to cancel its plans to offer consumers a lower interest rate on its 5-year fixed mortgage. The intervention drew fire on Tuesday from critics. According to the paper, religious violence is growing and the emerging government in Libya seems paralyzed 6 months after an attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, which saw the death of Ambassador Christopher Stevens and 3 other Americans. We look at China Daily, Wednesday's edition. According to China Daily, President Xi Jinping told U.S. Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew in Beijing on Tuesday that he wants to build a new type of relationship with Washington on core interests. This was Xi's first major meeting as president. The paper revealed that foreign direct investment rebounded in February after dropping for 8 consecutive months, signaling improving investor sentiments and confidence in the new leadership. This is according to analysts. The paper from China stated that greater international cooperation to thwart cyber attacks, boost online security, and end groundless accusations were some of the recommendations of a key report on internet security. Let's look at Gulf News. Its edition on Thursday. The Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC, has condemned repeated attempts to plant espionage cells in the member countries, reported the paper. The paper went on to say that on Tuesday evening, a Saudi Interior Ministry spokesman said that 18 people, 16 Saudis, 1 Lebanese and 1 Iranian, were arrested simultaneously for their role in an espionage network. The paper said the next general elections in Pakistan will be held on May 11, marking it the first democratic transition in the history of the country, but the paper cited that the deadlock over the nomination of a caretaker prime minister continues. The publication also stated that Palestinians were skeptical over chances for peace as U.S. president arrived in the Middle East. The Wall Street Journal, the Europe edition on Thursday, carried this story which said Cyprus on Wednesday was left with narrowing options to rescue its outsized financial service sector from collapse, something that could end its membership in the Eurozone after international lenders rejected an alternative government plan to secure a 10 billion euro bailout, and Russian officials remained cold to a Cyprus gas for cash deal. The paper as well reported that the Federal Reserve officials on Wednesday modestly upgraded their assessment of how the U.S. economy is performing, but kept the central bank's easy money policies intact because they do not see growth accelerating much. We look at the Times of India, the edition it had on Thursday. The paper said Samajwadi Party on Wednesday escalated pressure for the sacking of Union Steel Minister Beni Prasad Verma for having insinuated that Mulayam Singh extracts money from UPA. Another report indicated that three-times Chief Minister Sheila Dikshit firmly set the ground to seek a full term in the capital in her last budget speech before the assembly polls. In more politics news, the paper from India inscribed that DMK chief M. Karunanidhi on Wednesday ruled out a pre-poll alliance with the Congress for the 2014 Lok Sabha elections, but hastened to add that the party will do nothing to bring down the UPA government. In another report, the paper from India pointed out that suspected militants shot an 18-year-old boy inside a mosque in Sopore in North Kashmir on Tuesday night. The boy, identified as Suhail Ahmad Safi, was said to be involved in organizing cricket matches in his village with the help of the local army units. We take on the Washington Post, the edition it carried on Friday. This weekend edition of the press recounted that U.S. President Barack Obama on Thursday urged Israelis to move decisively in a spirit of self-preservation and empathy to secure a lasting peace. Obama, however, delivered an even sharper ultimatum to Palestinians to drop conditions that have held up a new round of negotiations. The paper went further to write that the newest output in the U.S. government's empire of drone bases sits behind a razor wire topped world outside the West African capital, blasted by 110-degree heat and the occasional sandstorm blowing from the Sahara. Read more from the Washington Post, the Friday edition. We end this press roundup with the Wall Street Journal, Friday edition. The paper in its kicker stated that jailed Kurdish rebel leader Abdullah Öcalan ordered his militant fighters to put down their weapons, withdraw from Turkish soil, and move into politics, marking the most concrete step in a month-long bid to end the conflict that has polarized Turkish society and left about 40,000 people dead. Please visit page 4 for more details. Just below the kicker, the journal pinpointed that the Cyprus government was preparing a bill Thursday night to restructure its second largest lender, Cyprus Popular Bank (PCL), in a last-ditch bid to unlock aid from the European Union and reopen the nation's banking system. See page 4 for the details. Well, that's the roundup of papers that we did review this week. Thank you for trusting us. But remember, you can go to our website, www.afriquemedia.tv, for all of this. Bye-bye.